Welcome everybody to Magnet Culture's Workforce webinar. We do these about every 6 to 8 weeks on various topics that we specialize in that help companies reduce employee turnover, which is our specialty. And today we're doing from insight to impact, leveraging self-awareness in the workplace. My name is Cara Silletto. I am the CEO and Chief Retention Officer here at Magnet Culture. And today I will be joined by one of our workforce strategists and specifically a Gen Z strategist, Miss Alayna Thomas.
Hello,
So really
everyone.
excited to partner together on this one. And we're going to talk today specifically about building self-awareness in ourselves and hopefully our teams and the leaders around us as well, because we've got to understand that importance of self-awareness. We have to learn how to identify and adapt our own styles in different situations. And we're going to talk today about some tools that will enhance self awareness and help you build those stronger relationships on your teams and within your workplace. So we've got a lot to cover, but we'll just kind of banter back and forth today with Alayna. And then we have a follow up of the next three webinars that we do here this fall are going to dive into these different assessment tools and self awareness tools. So today we're going to stay pretty high level about why self awareness is so important and what some of those tools are. And then we hope you'll come back and join us for the next three webinars as we share different tools that dive into different areas of self awareness. Now, as many of you know, we record all of our webinars and then pop those into some of them on our website, and others go on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You guessed it, youtube.com/magnet culture. If you subscribe there, then you will get notified whenever a new video pops up that we put on there. So every time we have a playback after these webinars, which is usually within a few days, that will pop up and you can then share that with your leaders and with your team because you'll want some nuggets of wisdom here shared broader than just the folks who were able to join us live. So really excited about that. We also have an open Q&A box. So whenever you have questions or thoughts as we're speaking, you're welcome to put some comments in the comment box in the chat, but we'd love to have your official questions come into that Q&A box. So there's a button at the bottom of your screen that you can grab, and be sure to stay for the entire session today because Alayna and I have a mwahaha special gift for those who come today and special offer for you. So got to stick around to the end of that, and it's only available for the folks on today's live call as well. And before we dive in, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Alayna. She is a newer partner on our team, although now she's already out hitting the road working with all of our clients. So, Alayna is a wise beyond her years Gen Z professional. Okay. And if you haven't done the math and everything here, not to out her too much, but Alayna is 26 years old, and yet you're going to see by working with her that she's just absolutely amazingly brilliant, and we're so glad to have her on our team. She's already got her master's in management. She's already got her professional designation from SHRM for being an HR professional. She teaches at UT Dallas. I just love her to death. She is a great human, and I don't know about
So
you, but I
kind.
love surrounding myself with great humans on our team and with our clients and partners and everything. So Alayna and I have been working very hard, specifically these last 3 months, to widen our generational programs. Many of you know we have award-winning millennial mindset programs that we've been doing for years, and we're broadening that spectrum to now include Gen Z. So really excited to already get Alayna out on the road. She's booked up for association keynotes. She's got training on the books, ready to go for this fall and into 2025. So y'all let me know if you need me to hold dates for Alayna for you, okay? Because she is hot right now, and everybody's looking for this great Gen Z speaker to come help bridge those generational gaps. So gonna have a really great conversation here. Alayna, welcome to the call.
Thank you so much. You flatter me. That means so much. That was a wonderful intro. And also, my age is a horribly kept secret. I practically wear t-shirts that say I'm 26, but please don't let me in with the 12-year-olds that are also Gen Z. So I'm just excited. And it's fun. We get to talk a little bit less about generations today. Last time we talked, it was all about generations. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to get to have this conversation.
Yes, and in fact, if you missed our Gen Z deep dive with Alayna from this spring, that's on our YouTube page. So go check that out. And welcome back to those of you who continue to join us for our webinars month after month. So today, let's talk about self-awareness. So Alayna, what does self-awareness mean to you in the context of leadership specifically?
Well, it's the whole reason why I'm the leader that I am today. I mean, you already started with my age. I could not be thinking about how other people think and taking an approach that is really all about impact in the workplace if I didn't have leaders in my life that told me to ask these hard questions. And actually, some of them start as easy, but they do get hard, right? What do you like to do? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself? What do you want to be when you grow up? I just love that question so much. And of course, my leaders didn't say, "Okay, great. You're not good at that. Awesome. We'll just let you do the things that you're good at." Like, no, that I've had awesome leaders who said, "Okay, you're not good at that. How could we stretch you just a little bit? Okay, great. You mastered that. Let's stretch a little bit further." And so my leaders haven't let me stay in my comfort zone just because I learned something about myself. I don't just to get to stay that person, but how can I keep growing? And so I just think that's so helpful early in your career. So anyone who's listening that is earlier in your career, this is crucial right now. But just because you're later in your career doesn't mean that this isn't an incredible skill to have. So self-awareness in the context of leadership is important at every single step.
Yes, and I would argue if you are more experienced in your career that it is even more critical because you are behind the times if
Mm,
you're not self-aware. And we all judge one another, we all drive each other crazy
mm,
just by the way that we show up. Each of us has our quirks and our preferences of how we show up in the workplace. And that's gonna make somebody else mad. If
mm,
you're too chipper in the morning or you're too organized, people will see you as a perfectionist, or if you're not organized enough, people will see you as sloppy or,
mm,
this introvert extrovert spectrum. There's all these different things that there's no right or wrong in the way that we are, the way that we're wired, for example, but in the way we show up, that
yeah.
can cause conflict, that can cause um a lot of judgment and us versus them when people don't understand. So just being aware of who you are and then being able to make necessary adjustments, that helps us tremendously to build the relationships that we want to have in an organization. So I am seeing um, big uptick in the requests for assessments and
Mm,
for self-awareness classes and things because what I have found is in the 90s a lot of companies had leadership programs and supervisor 101 and they were using all these different tools and assessments, and then in the 2000s and 2010s we had to cut training and development because there
mm,
was recessions or times got tough or we're just trying to do more with less with our budgets, and a lot of organizations cut those tools. And so then when I talk to a manager, let's say I've got, an HR leader that's in their 50s, and I'll mention DISC or EQ or any of the Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finders. They say, "Oh, I've done all of those. I know I'm a purple
mm.
giraffe," whatever it is. And what's interesting is then when I say, "Well, what about your leaders?" Or they know that they're an orange owl or whatever the different colors and animals and quadrants they are, and they say, "You know what? I did that like 20 years ago when I was a new leader, but no, I don't think that the people we've put into these positions now even really know what they are." And maybe that's why they're showing up in a way that doesn't mesh with the rest of the
Mm,
team, right? So I think now it's just critically important that we make sure everybody has these tools, and especially ourselves. We got to start with ourselves first,
mm.
and then we can go share the tools and things with our leaders. So, yeah, what are some misconceptions that you think people have, Elena, about self-awareness and even, just some of these tools like DISC or EQ and
Yeah.
some of the assessments or even training, like soft
Yeah.
skills training that we know is critical, but what do you think are some of the misconceptions out there
Yeah.
about that?
I love that you just said soft skills because I think that might explain why I've heard this misconception. But I have heard, well, all this stuff, it's fluffy. It's soft,
Uh,
it's fluffy. We don't need it. We only need the hard stuff, business acumen, all of that,
yeah.
which sure. But do you have conflict on your team? What's your culture like? You have turnover? Like all of those things. And I once heard a CEO say, we are not doing that fluffy crap. And I was like, "Okay, okay," because there was actually really big interpersonal team conflict happening, and I was trying to give a lot of different solutions, right? And one of them was a team building personality assessment. I didn't make this up out of thin air. It's a proven tool to help. But when he said, "We're not doing that fluffy crap," he meant all of it. The personality assessment, the training. And it breaks my heart to hear that because even if you don't think that your team needs to know if they're a purple giraffe or an orange owl, that might really benefit and explain why there's some of that conflict. What do you think about the fluffy piece?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that over the years, and I've heard people now change the term soft skills to critical skills, or
Ooh,
of
yeah.
course, just using the term leadership skills more. And what's interesting is a lot of times executives will come to me and say, "We need to change the behavior. We need
Mm,
people to be held more accountable. We need them to shift their mindset and all of that." But then maybe I will mention these tools or these fluffy, soft
mhm,
skill classes, and they immediately, oh, well, we don't need that. Yet they want to shift the mindset. They want to change the behavior. And soft skills, which is the
mm,
general term for all those leadership and communication type skills, those are how we change
mm.
behavior and shift mindsets. And there's some other terminology out there too that kind of drives me crazy is people will say personality tests. I need
I
to,
just said it.
give my team, right? Give my team a personality test. And I think we can make a stronger business case when we say what it really is, which is it's a
Mm,
behavioral style assessment.
yeah.
It's a behavioral styles tool. And when we start, especially in HR, speaking more executive speak or finance speak, don't talk about morale, but talk about turnover. How
Mm,
much is this costing us when our teams don't get along versus, well, we just need to have a better culture and better morale.
mm.
Those are a bit harder to quantify for our CFO and our CEO or our board. And so I definitely think that we need to speak more bottom line around
Yeah.
these things of how do we make a business case? How do we impact the bottom line through these tools and training and this increase in self-awareness? And another misconception I've seen too, I remember earlier in my career, people saying like, well, I am who I am and she just
Mm,
needs to deal with it. You know, and now that I know about self-awareness and tools like this and team dynamics and everything, I I really hope that that person I used to work with who said that, I really hope that she has been enlightened and been given the tools to
mm,
understand that we are probably not going to build strong relationships on our team if we draw a line in the sand
yeah.
or dig our heels in and say, well, I just am that way and she can deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to use it
Because
as like a weapon or an excuse. Like
yeah.
anything that we use as an excuse,
Mhm.
it's not good. Like this, we don't need to do that. That's not good.
Right, right. And being self-aware is good that she said, "I am who I am."
Yes.
The problem was, and I don't care if she likes it or not, I'm not gonna change. That's how
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
work. So it's like that secondary piece that I am who I am is good to know, but then we need to then say, and because I know that I drive people crazy by being the way I am, certain people at certain times of the day, then I can make that adjustment.
Yeah.
But if I don't care, I mean, and maybe there are people out there who truly don't care what other people think of them. I just feel like as a leader, you're going to have a really hard time managing those people.
Yeah.
And certainly we don't want someone with that attitude in leadership managing other people, because one size doesn't fit all, and
Mm,
they're not going to be able to adjust and adapt and flex with their team
yeah.
if they just refuse to
Yeah.
change or make any adjustments.
Yeah. So can I ask you what's something that you learned, maybe a pivotal moment where you learned that you were kind of operating, I am who I am, and that wasn't working for other people?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mentioned the word chipper. When I did the disc the very first time, DISC, it's a very specific tool that we'll talk about in a few minutes. When I did that, I was about 25, 26. Luckily, my company brought in the assessment and the training, and everybody just thought I was really social and talkative and charismatic, and I always heard these positive words. Kara's such a people person, and all the positive words that go with being what's called a high I on the disc or a high influencer. Then people started saying, "She's so chipper." And that was not positive, Alayna. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
quite negative.
I was
So what
laughing
was
with you,
interesting,
not
what's
at
that?
you. I said I was laughing with you, not at you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So what was interesting was once I figured out that the people who were calling me chipper tended to be folks who were not morning people. And they
Mm,
needed their
okay.
coffee, before it's like, do not talk to me till I have my
Yes.
coffee, Kara. And once I realized that, I could still be myself, but I could tone it down
Mm,
for those particular people in the morning. Maybe I would bring my whole self into the afternoon when I was talking with them. Or if I needed to be my
mm,
whole self in the morning, I just didn't bother her and I would go talk to him because he's more
yeah.
of a morning person and more chipper like me. So it was really pivotal for me to know that. And I also remember a mentor saying to me, "Hey, if you need something from this person," right? I'll make up names. I have real names in my head, but okay, Shelly, let's call her. If you need something from Shelly, she doesn't like to chit chat. She's busy. Just get to the point and say,
Mm,
"Shelly, can I get that report we talked about?" But you're going to go talk to, let's call her Cheryl. If you're going to go talk to Cheryl, then you really need to
mm,
ask about her grandkids first.
mm.
Because if you just come in and say, "Cheryl, can I get that report we talked about?" Then she said, "Well, you're a little snippy
Yeah.
today or a little rude." And if you say, "Cheryl, how are your kids?" or "What was your weekend?" Just say, "Oh," and just light up and let her talk about the grandkids for a minute or two, and then say, "That's could I get the report we talked about?" And she will say, "Gladly." Be happy to send that to you. And so my mentor, even before we took those disc assessments, kind of told me how to operate around different folks in order to get what I wanted. Right? And what's in it for me? I can be me and just go in guns a blazing and say whatever I want to everybody the same way, or I can adjust my approach and get a much better outcome and get what I want faster and without making anybody upset as well. Right. So that's exciting. All right. Oh no, did we lose Alayna? We might have. It's all right. She'll be back in a minute, I'm sure. Okay. So let's talk for a minute then about why it's important also for leader to adapt their style. Because I've kind of talked about this a little bit, and it's really important that we value every person's style. Again, there's no necessarily right or wrong. Now, when we get into things like emotional intelligence, where you have that knee jerk emotional reaction at organizations, that can sometimes be inappropriate or unprofessional. So we definitely want to keep that in check. But as far as your behavioral style and the way you show up, every single style has value. And I'm really glad, like my mom was a staff accountant for decades, and she loved running the same report every day. Um, she would actually, what she told me was she runs the report on Monday. She spends all week reconciling and figuring out where the problem numbers are, and then has to have it finished and submitted by Friday. And guess what? On Monday, same report, same procedure of reconciling and then submitting by Friday. And to me, does not sound like fun at all, at all, at all. Okay. But I'm really glad that my mom loves to do that because we need accountants, don't we? We need folks who like their comfort zone, who like to do repeat work. And we also need people like me who have that chipper nature. Thank you, Fran. She said she loves my chipperness and she's seen me present and speak. And so that is a great skill I can bring into my world of speaking and training. But I probably shouldn't be, hey, she's back.
I'm back. Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no problem. We all have those issues, right? So, yeah, I was just talking about how we need to value each different
Mm.
style, Alayna, and that my mom's an accountant, and I'm really glad she likes to be an accountant with details and repeat work, where I have found my calling as a speaker trainer because of that chipperness that I have. And I think my clients appreciate it, our followers appreciate it, and I'm also glad that not everyone is as talkative as Cara
Mm.
because we would not get anything done. Well,
Well,
that type of thing
you're
too. So
just
yeah,
talking about your mom and being an accountant. And I think I knew pretty early on that accounting was not going to be the right path for me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I learned through my first, I think I took it in college. So maybe 18, 19. I took my first behavioral assessment, Strengths Finder, and learned through that, and it was repeated through DISC and through other assessments that I took, that I have low attention to detail unless it relates to people. Because I am just like you, very people oriented. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, that was the feedback that I kept getting from my leaders. And every single job description out there says under minimum qualifications, high attention to detail. And so it's not
hmm
something that I can just say, oh, I'm not great at detail. Okay. And go work on something else. I have to build this skill. So for me, this self awareness, the insight to the impact piece is that I have to build in extra time and work harder to double check any highly detailed work that isn't related to people. And
right.
the teams that I work on, I have had less conflict or clashing because it's not like, oh, Alayna messed it up again. It's, hey, Elena's asking me to double check. Totally get that. And now I'm able to move forward and to keep growing in that
Right.
area. Um,
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's a balance between some people say, well, but I told Kara to be my authentic, which
hmm,
is so important, especially for
yeah.
Gen Z today, to have leaders who are vulnerable and authentic and real, transparent and all of that. And so, in the example I said earlier about my high eye chipperness in the mornings, still be myself, but
Mm,
I may have to like pull that back or tone it down at certain
yeah.
times. Then I can bring that forward and shine in certain instances and certain situations too. So it's not, we're not telling people don't be who you are.
Mm,
And in fact, in the DISC assessment tool, it shows you your natural style versus your adapted
mm,
style. And that's really important to know how much you've adapted for your current role.
yes.
So we have a great question in the Q&A here I want to address. And they said, well, if you know a team member doesn't like you, and is pretty vocal about it. There were some who would talk about me behind my back, about my chipperness, for example. Then what do we do? Right?
Mm,
How do we handle that in a situation? And I had a mentor once who said to me, if you don't like somebody, get to know them better.
that's good.
And it has worked beautifully because whenever I had like just a bad first impression or just, she doesn't,
Mm,
we don't jive, we don't vibe. It's just not clicking. Okay. I have found that almost every single person, even if trying to keep my judgment in check, even if I just really didn't like them at first or somebody didn't like me at first, almost every time I have said, Can we go to lunch? Can we have coffee?
mm,
I'd love to just get to know you more and learn about
mm,
their hobbies, their family, their faith, everything about them that's
mm,
important. we've been able to find commonality because a lot of times these differences are glaring right out front, right? The differences show up loud and clear, but sometimes it's harder to find some commonalities. And I'll tell you, even if I didn't love working with somebody at first, as soon as I find out they're a dog person, mm, all is right in the world.
Yeah.
Because then we've got the commonality, we both love dogs, and I'm done. That's it. They're my new best friend.
Yeah. Well, and then like on a flip side, so maybe the person asking this question is like, I don't really like to get to know people." Okay, well, definitely, I think first that's huge. But the second, I did work with a coworker. We were equal, two peers. She was older than me, and so that also created some tension there because we were at the same level, but she was older than me, and I believe did have more experience. And we learned that we actually had, as we got to know each other more, that we had kind of opposite strengths. And so, what we were able to do, because we kept clashing and we kept not getting along, because it would be
Yep.
like, well, I think it should be done that way. Well, I'm seeing it from a different way. And we had like no mediator, there was no third party because we have to be
Yeah.
adults and do our job and everything. And so we were able to start splitting the work because there were two of us for a job for two people, arguably maybe a job for three people. But and so we reduced the amount that we disliked each other or had kind of that like, oh, she's coming in
Mhm.
today. Oh, I kind of like when she wasn't coming in today, that sort of feeling, because we started splitting. Hey, I'll take that. And between the two of us, I actually did have higher attention to detail, speak what I did before. So I really had to flex that muscle too and say, okay, well, I'm the one that's got to do that. And it was easier for each of us to get to like have some ownership over something.
Mhm.
Cause I mean, think about it. Like when you're proud of something, it's a lot easier to, I don't know, just to think about how other people are part of that with you and like this, we're all in this together feeling, and it reduces that amount of divisiveness or I don't like them so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And these tools, I mean, we see a lot of teams that have that divisiveness, that have conflict, just the different styles. Now, not everybody's going to get along, you guys.
Mm,
That just happens. And certainly there are people that even after I've gotten to know them, but still were not my cup of tea. And
yeah.
so that's okay. But a lot of the conflict and disconnect with folks can be resolved by understanding those different styles. Like you said, Elena, of you just work differently. And once you realize that, you can maximize the relationship by
Yeah.
complementing one another's
Yeah.
styles and whatnot too. So yeah, I think there's a big shift now in this vulnerability
Mm.
conversation with the younger workers. What are your thoughts on that, Elena?
Yeah. I think, well, let me start with the younger worker piece because I think that I ask my students, I talk to friends of mine, and the words that keep coming up are we really value authenticity and transparency. And I think both of those things, we talk a lot about spectrums. I think there might be too transparent sometimes and what that looks like. But this is really different, especially as we've worked together. You've helped me understand that older generations, it really was about title and authority and wisdom. So you don't have to be transparent with me. I trust that based on your title, you're doing what needs to be done. And I trust that you know more than me and all of that. And I don't know if Gen Z ever most Gen Z will admit to the phrase they know more than me. And we're working on that. I'm trying to help my peers because we don't know everything. I'm still learning. But it really
Yeah.
is so important for a leader to be able to say, like the authenticity piece is that's not my strength. I'm still working on that. I don't have all the answers. And that is a trust builder and is crucial to keeping our
Mhm.
younger workers. And I think it's going to take some time as a leader. If you've not done that before, it's going to take some time to adapt and figure out
Yeah.
what language feels authentic to you. But
Mhm.
vulnerability, it used to be the weakness. We don't talk about these things. And now it's kind of an expectation in the
Right.
workplace.
Well, we just taught, Elena and I went to Alabama and taught a 2-day retention retreat
Yeah.
for a group of leaders. And during the 2-day program, someone asked me a question, and I was very open and transparent about here's what I do know about that topic because it wasn't part of our curriculum. So I said, here's what I do know, but I also want to tell you that I don't know a lot about this. And I gave some resources and told how I'm still learning and listening to the conversation because it was outside of my wheelhouse. And later, Alayna said, wow, I really respected you now even more because you
Mm.
told these people who see you as an expert,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question, right? I didn't try to, like, pardon me, but BS it. I didn't try
Yeah.
to make it up and say, oh, yes, well, I know all about that topic too, because I am clearly an expert at everything. Well, I'm
Yeah.
trying to stay in my lane. And it was cool to have her say, as a part of our team, like, wow, Kara, that was great to see you build trust with the audience by saying, I don't know the answer to that, but also I built Elena's trust and loyalty on our
Mm.
team by showing that vulnerability. And I think a lot of leaders still have a lot of ways to go with that,
Yeah.
including myself. But I do see a lot of leaders still, especially those with decades of experience, that really think that their wisdom and their years of experience, that's the reason they should have respect.
Mm.
And for really no other reason, especially not for transparency or vulnerability.
Yeah.
They do see those as weaknesses. So these tools can be really eye-opening for a lot of those folks
Yeah.
to think differently for sure.
Yeah. And I do want to say if you all are like, "Oh, I want to hear you talk more about that," because I think we could talk about that a lot, let us know. But because I want to set us up for some of these webinars to come, Kara, can I ask you what are some of the tools that are available for employees and leaders to become more self-aware and to really start adapting to be more effective leaders? What are some of those tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So the three big ones that we talk about, and let me give you some names of others first, right? So there's a million. She's mentioned strengths finders, there's the Enneagram, there's 12 driving forces, there's true colors, there's Colby, there's all these tools out there, and many of them are great. Okay, there's a lot of great, very valid tools out there, but you do want to do your homework because there are also a lot of not valid tools out there. And we've done a lot of research to make sure that our partner, that where we have learned our assessment tools and have access to that, we made sure that these were statistically valid and really great tools. Now, I've also used some tools over the years that were statistically valid, but they just didn't stick
Mm.
in the training. People couldn't remember it. And that's part of why some of these tools, I think, just have too many facets to them.
Mm.
Like, for example, 12 driving forces. Well, we used to teach that assessment and certify on that. And we just realized that leaders can't remember all 12.
Mm.
It was just too many. So we have stuck with more of the tools now that are easy to remember, easy to implement and
Mm.
apply on your team. And some companies even make the language from the assessment part of their company culture.
Mm.
Once you know what DISC stands for, it's pretty easy to then talk about that high I and the low C and things even within your team and within your office or organization. And I've seen people get certified in it and then have everybody take the assessments and do training, and it really becomes a part of
Yeah.
their language and their company culture, which is cool. So the ones that we offer now, the first, of course, is DISC. If I haven't already said it 18 times, this is a true four quadrant, hundreds of year old type of philosophy of how we show up. That's the behavioral styles. That's the one people often call a personality test. But your behavioral style appears to be hardwired in you, in your brain,
Mm.
by about age 5 to 10 years old. I mean, I can look at my 9-year-old son and he is an extrovert. Okay. He is likely to be an extrovert now for the rest of his life, unless he has big things that
Mm.
happen. So they call them the 3 Ds: death, divorce, and disease.
Wow.
So if a major thing happens in your life, that may shake you up and make you different. So I know, for example, when the pandemic hit, I used to be, no joke, all right, 99% percentile for extroversion. Those who know me are not shocked.
What?
I
Huh?
was, I know, I was 99th percentile. And because of the pandemic, because of the forced isolation time and rethinking priorities and having to shift a lot of my in-person communication and relationships to virtual, I have dropped in that. So that's what I mean by it's hardwired, but it doesn't mean it can't ever change. And if you go through a big traumatic event in your life, it can adjust. But for the most part, people are who they are with their disc behavioral styles, and it measures things like, do you make decisions with your gut, quick decision, or do you want to get all the facts and
Mm,
research and take time for that? It also addresses that introvert extrovert type of spectrum, and your level of, just call it organization, but really it's about your level of compliance and structure that you like.
mm.
So are you very, very organized and structured? You love checklists, or do you prefer to wing it? And yeah, I know where that document is over here on my piles. They look messy to other people, but I know where to find them. That would be the opposite of someone who is super organized or super structured. So there's no right or wrong, remember, but knowing each one is really important, so that you can tone it down when needed or use that strength when needed and balance with others as well. When maybe you need to complement something and pull some weight that they don't have naturally as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this, definitely deep dive overview, but more details on our next webinar that Alayna's going to lead on September 13th. So really excited about that. So that's kind of where we start with assessments and self-awareness tools. The next level, I would call it kind of the 201, is emotional intelligence. And this one actually can change over time. So while your DISC, typically you only need to take a DISC assessment one time in your working career, because it does show who you are. The EQ changes, and this measures your ability to read the room and to be able to regulate your emotional response. And can you keep your emotions in check for decision making? Because we know when we get emotionally hijacked, we lose some cognitive abilities. We can
Yeah.
make mountains out of molehills, things like that. And so that one is really important to understand, um, reading other people as well. So does that person have a poker face, or can you read their
Mm,
emotions without them saying a word, that type of thing. And then the highest level of emotional intelligence tends to be your ability to regulate others' emotions. So, can you communicate in a way that keeps folks from having those emotional outbursts, and or if they're already emotionally hijacked, can you talk a team member off of that emotional ledge
mm.
and really help them to get back to a clear-headed cognitive state for better decision making and better communication. So that's a really cool tool, and you actually want to check your EQ score every few years because, spoiler alert for that webinar that's happening this fall, is that your EQ can drop, and it often does when you get higher in leadership, because
Mm,
you can imagine that a frontline leader, manager, supervisor, they're working with people every day on the front line, talking to their people often. They tend to have really strong EQ because they see people a lot and know what's going on. Once you get to director status and vice president or executive status, your EQ can drop because what are you doing? You're managing spreadsheets, you're
mm.
in meetings, you're not managing people anymore on the day to day. So we have to be really, really careful. And that tool and that training, y'all, can be a real eye opener for your senior leaders. So keep that in mind if we need to get folks back in check, I would say. And then, really excited to announce we are launching a new assessment this fall called the DNA Competencies Assessment, and it is so cool, because it's not about how you're wired like the behavioral style.
Mhm.
This is, what do you know how to do well? We all know what competencies are, and it is a lot of the competencies that we look for in every team member, but in particular leaders for sure,
Mm,
of problem solving, time management, teamwork, customer service or being customer focused? What is your competency around flexibility and creativity? There's actually 25 soft skill competencies that are measured and that can certainly change over time and hopefully grow, but it measures which of the 25 competencies are well developed
Hmm.
versus developed versus needs development. So it is a great tool for mentoring and building training paths and training plans for folks, and a lot of other uses as well. So we'll dive into that one later in the webinar series too. But those are the big three: the DISC behavioral styles, the emotional intelligence or EQ, as most people call it, and then the new DNA competencies assessment as well to figure out where some of your areas of improvement are. We won't call them weaknesses, but areas for growth, I would say.
Opportunities.
That's opportunities. Exactly, exactly. So great. So Alayna, let me ask you this then. Why do you think companies should invest in building self-awareness? What
Yeah.
I mean, it costs money to do these
Yeah.
things.
Well, I feel like we've talked about so much, right? We've talked about conflict and some of that being like intergenerational conflict happening. It seems like miscommunication, all of these things. And that has a business impact, right? So if there's enough conflict, you have to spend so much time resolving that. Maybe you even have high turnover, which is our specialty, is all about retention, right? So we have these things that already are costing money to the business. And so let's just shift that money instead of spending it on all of that retroactively. Let's be a little proactive. But also, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about generations, but I got to mention them. We have 5 generations in the workplace right now. And if you weren't aware of that, definitely encourage you to like keep up with the trends on that. Follow me and Cara on LinkedIn, connect with us. But there are 5 generations in the workplace, and we are all at different levels of awareness of how we show up. And we also have some of like our tried and true ways that we're like, well, that's just the way I lead. And you can hear that come out of the mouth of anyone, no matter if they're an individual contributor or if they're an executive, if they're 66 or 26, right? We all say these things. And actually, I think the need for self awareness is a commonality that we have. It's not something that's a difference. And so I just think that we are all unique individuals, and investing and getting to know your people will have these big impacts of reducing a lot of these other negatives that are costing you a lot of money.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing more and more conflict
Mm.
on teams, primarily because we're not spending time doing team building. And I'm not talking
Right.
about marshmallow towers and trust falls, but actually getting to know folks. When I go into an organization that has retention problems and I ask about how do you acclimate your new hires onto the team?
Mm.
What is your strategy for that? What activities, what conversations, what questions are you asking? How are you building those relationships? They say, "Well, we're just busy. We just throw them on the floor. We got to go. We do training. Check, 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 check." But that's it. And you all, culture, company culture is actually how people are treated.
Mm.
That's your company culture. So, do you want to invest in your company culture to where folks get along better and understand one another and reduce judgment of others? Or can we keep doing things the way we've been doing it, of not doing much team building, just hoping people come in and do their job and get their paycheck and go home? That I'm not seeing as a great way to operate today, because we're losing a lot of staff if we don't focus on those relationships and help one another appreciate different
Mm.
people and different styles as well. So it is worth every penny to develop, especially your managers, but even to help your managers develop their team members as well with tools like this.
Yeah.